Story 1. Watching women in their early 20s get filler, Botox, and other treatments and end up looking older than me, sometimes more than 10 years older, is wild. This race against aging has always existed, of course, but it is getting way out of hand. It saddens me how afraid of aging young women are these days. Story 2. There is a general anxiety about ever failing or making mistakes. I attribute this to growing up with lives lived broadcast online and worrying they will become the next 30-second reel for laughs or go viral due to an error in judgment. Our digital culture is merciless, and younger generations have not experienced most of their life without some form of it being shared with hundreds or even thousands. This raises ethical questions about how we as parents choose to document everything online. Similarly, we now see younger people terrified of messing up in ways I don't think we experienced because our youth was not shared so instantly and so widely. Story 3. I am 32, so I do not know if this counts as older, but for the love of God, the number of things that are not great being posted to easily traceable social media worries me. In the past, we did not always record our dumb moments or awful thoughts to upload on social media, but now it is so easy to ruin your life. Story 4. How afraid they are of aging. The way some talk, it is like being 30 is their worst nightmare. I do not know, maybe I have seen too many friends not make it past their mid-20s that I realize it is a privilege to age. Story 5. Seeing 13 to 16-year-old girls doing 8-step skincare routines and wearing a lot of makeup, as well as people in their 20s getting filler and Botox, is totally unnecessary and makes them look older than they are. I think this is the opposite of what they are aiming for. Story 6. Assuming older means over 30. The number of teenagers and 20-somethings who think Instagram filters represent real life. They believe perfectly smooth skin with no texture is actually achievable. Story 7. I thought body positivity was supposed to be improving. It seems much worse. I do not mean to sound like an older person complaining, but I do not want to hear how broke you are when you are spending hundreds of dollars on eyelash extensions. Money management is important for your independence. Ladies. Story 8. Watching them overspend on designer merchandise. Invest your money, keep your money, no need to blow it trying to impress others. Edit. Not buying overpriced designer items doesn't mean the only option is low quality. I especially love the items with their branding all over the product. Story 9. Being unable to sit in silence without your phone. I take a reformer Pilates class 3 to 4 times a week. I am the only millennial in a sea of 20-somethings. They are all on their phones until the class starts, and then they respond to texts in the middle. Does your brain not need a break? Story 10. Having to document everything good or bad in their lives on social media for the world to see. Specifically on TikTok, making videos asking for advice on everyday things, like, what should I wear to the farmer's market in my local town? Or, what shoes are we wearing this spring? I can't fathom a world where I completely redid my wardrobe to keep up with every trend each season of every year. I'm going to need you young ladies to start making your own simple decisions and not put everything online. I feel like Mr. Griffith from the movie Easy A. I don't know what your generation's fascination is with documenting your every thought, but I can assure you, they're not all diamonds. Roman is having an okay day and bought a Coke Zero at the gas station. Raise the roof. Story 11. I'm in my 40s and I think younger women are great. I admire their assertiveness and sense of inherent worth, which took me a while to learn, and more of them seem to have at a younger age. They are also more aware of mental health and less constrained by rules like when to get married. I think all of those things are wonderful. I think social media is hurting them, though. Many have unrealistic ideas about how average people live. They tend to see the top 1% as rich and the top 5% as average or doing okay, without ever looking at the bottom 95%. They underestimate trade-offs or seem to see them as unfair. I think they compare their insides to other people's outsides a lot and assume that their struggles are more specific to their personal identities than they really are. Story 12. The lack of concern about issues and rights that were hard fought for them. Financial independence and security, rights to bodily autonomy, rights to work, and rights for participation. These things have either already existed for them or they believe they just exist. I have heard more than one young woman lament, having to work, and can't we just go back to when women did not have to work? Women have always worked. They just did it and did not get the benefits of it. They did not have rights to their own money, their own property, their own education, their own children, or their own consent. Generations of women have worked too hard to gain those things for them to be discarded through lack of concern. Story 13. I've gone back to school at 48, so I spend a lot of my time around women half my age. I think young women are fantastic, to be honest. The only thing that really gives me pause is seeing how heavily they rely on artificial intelligence. Maybe you can get an A in the class, but the actual point is to develop a body of knowledge and clinical reasoning skills. We are healthcare majors. Story 14. 44-year-old female, you really need to stop worrying about whether or not you look or come off as something negative. You are never going to make everyone happy. There will always be people who make fun of you and put you down, especially regarding your appearance. Find your style, your aesthetic, and ignore influencers who make you feel less than so they can sell you things you do not need. Feeling that green lipstick? Go for it. Story 15. How many people rely on an artificial intelligence summary at the top of a Google search instead of clicking on a verified link from a reputable website to find accurate information about the topic they are looking up? They then confidently repost the information, spreading misinformation, especially about health matters. When someone corrects them, they become aggressively defensive and argue that the internet said so. However, artificial intelligence is not programmed to verify the data it returns after a search, nor does it differentiate between fact and fiction. It is shocking the things they believe yet refuse to verify, and how unwilling they are to have a real-life human being who knows something they do not advise them. It is especially ironic when they ask for information yet reject the answer. Story 16. With everything we now know about nicotine and smoking, it shocks me that vaping is appealing. I know nicotine does not directly cause harmful effects, but its addictive nature causes the user to continue smoking, which harms them. Vaping contains formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, and sometimes heavy metals and other toxic compounds that cause lung and throat cancer just as much as the tar from tobacco. Story 17. I feel so old writing this, and this isn't just about women, obviously, but being able to converse with a relative stranger. It's a skill to carry on a bit of back and forth with random people in your day-to-day life. Oh, and the swearing or mindless talk. I listened to an episode of Amy Poehler's podcast where she was interviewing Renee Rapp. It was a hard listen due to Renee's inability to clearly articulate her thoughts without dropping curses every other word. Grandma's heading off to bed now. Kids, laugh out loud. Story 18. I'm 43 and amazed at the number of my colleagues in their 20s getting filler in surgery. It's an insane epidemic when they look perfectly lovely without altering their faces. One of my friends is a true beauty yet has had repeated procedures. She is beginning to look like a caricature. It's as if she is striving for perfection but has never seen that she was a natural beauty to start with. It seems like mass dysmorphia. I'm glad I was a teenager in the 1990s. Story 19. Getting picked up by the most unsuccessful people from my high school but thinking they are winning because it is an older attractive man. Story 20. This applies especially to young people who refuse to read anything longer than a few short paragraphs. In my job, I send many internal emails to employees. Messages are intentionally made short and concise. Many young people reply to the emails with, "Can you summarize this information for me?" Story 21. It's interesting timing for this question. I went to a family member's wedding last Saturday. It was a wonderful wedding in a barn, casual for the most part. I was sitting with other family members along with the bride's mother. She mentioned that her youngest daughter told her not to wear a black dress, so she chose a floral pink and coral on a black base, which looked lovely on her. Her story was that she had a wonderful black dress she wanted to wear, but her daughter told her that wearing a black dress means that you dislike the groom. Even wearing a red dress means you had an affair with the groom. Our whole table was flabbergasted. Not one of us at the table of 8 had ever heard of such a thing. She revealed that her youngest daughter, not the bride, saw it on TikTok. I looked it up, and black is fine as is red. We had a great time seeing so many black dresses at the wedding. Red too. The groom is a fantastic guy, and I'm chalking this up to misinformation from TikTok. To sum it up, Why are young people getting their social information from unreliable sources on TikTok? Story 22. Not to sound like the crypt keeper here, I'm barely in my mid-30s, but watching some of you in your early 20s treat your faces like expired Mr. Potato Heads with all the filler and contour is a journey. I blinked, and suddenly everyone has the same TikTok face. Highlighter beaming, lips looking like a car crash, and cheeks that could store winter rations. Also, the way some of you are just exposing yourselves on the internet with zero filter or foresight is wild. The original poster really unlocked something here. Back in my day, she said, dramatically sipping LaCroix, we at least had the decency to ruin our reputations privately, not in high definition on a public Instagram story. Love yourselves, hydrate, and maybe chill with the face apps before you all start looking like melted wax museums by 28. Story 23. They spend hours on their phones but ask the most basic questions instead of simply looking up the answer. Just search for it online, for Christ's sake. For clarification, young men do this as well. Story 24. It is very interesting that I rarely ever feel like Reddit is a place to find mature, reasonable, and coherent conversations. Yet this thread asking older women is full of them. So nice, so considerate, and still in depth. Story 25. I will get downvoted, but what the heck? I think once their brains fully develop, many young women will regret selling their bodies on OnlyFans to strangers for money. Also, the plastic in their faces is notable. I regret tanning in the 1990s and 2000s. It has undoubtedly aged me. I imagine starting fillers at 20 will be a similar regret. Story 26. The total lack of boundaries. I found out my 24-year-old is sharing a Life 360 account with her boyfriend plus 4 other friends. Her potential fiancé was upset about it because he can't even sneak off to a jeweler to order her ring since, even if she didn't, notice the activity others in the friend group would. What is that about? Have a single boundary. That's so strange to me. If you're doing something sketchy, share your location for that evening and turn it off when you're done. I find it uncomfortable and odd. Also, there seem to be only 3 modes of dress. You either dress like a frumpy bohemian librarian, like you just rolled out of bed wearing the same clothes from the prior 3 days of sleep, or like you're on the way to the club. Whichever dressing style you choose, you often criticize the women who choose another. I don't see much balanced middle ground, and there's far too much judgment and rhetoric about why anyone would choose to shave or not shave, dress their best or dress for bed. I'm not less of a woman or conforming to life-ruining norms because I prefer smooth legs, nor am I doing a disservice to women by out-earning and outperforming my husband in a male-dominated field. The rhetoric on both feminist and traditional wife sides is too isolating and judgmental. Also, birth control. Ladies, not needing insurance to pay for birth control is not the advantage you think it is. We just got it covered by insurance in the 1980s. Why should you pay full cost out of pocket for something that healthcare historically didn't cover? Until your parents' generation. I clearly remember my mother sobbing with relief when her birth control was finally covered by insurance because it meant her healthcare needs were going to be underwritten by their insurance policy. Just like my dad's vasectomy was. Story 27. I think they fell into the same traps we did. But if we try to warn them, they don't listen, just like we didn't. I do think some of those traps are more dangerous nowadays or have a more lasting impact, but I'm just a woman with a daughter who worries. Story 28. The anti-intellectual trend affects young men as well. Nobody reads anymore, and nobody wants to learn how things work. Curiosity is disappearing. Story 29. This recent resurgence of year 2000 skinny as a trend is concerning. Young women experienced many eating disorders and body dysmorphia issues. Do not chase that dangerous ideal. Story 30. I'm a high school substitute teacher. The most obvious, worrying thing is that girls need to speak up. It is honestly very disturbing to me how quiet and reserved the girls are. Many of them are too anxious to even raise their voices enough to be heard in class. They get constantly talked over by the boys. Where did all the loud, proud young women go? Maybe I am looking back on the past with rose-colored glasses, but in my memory of high school, girls were just as loud and rambunctious as the boys. Story 31. Young women who are very quick to jump into intense sex and relationships. You do not have to be into bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, sadism, and masochism to be sexually fulfilled. You do not have to be polyamorous when one partner is enough. You can be conventional and monogamous if that is what turns you on. Perhaps start there until you get the hang of things before you branch out. Story 32. I am concerned about how often the young women I know who are dating get choked by some man they barely know because he saw it in pornography or because another girl he dated once liked it. She thinks she is about to be harmed. He thinks he is being impressive. Where is the communication? I find that, along with other ways that mainstream pornography is impacting sexual norms, deeply troubling. Story 33. They quickly join the OnlyFans platform as soon as they turn 18, even when most do not need to engage in survival sex work. There is a widespread notion that sex work is empowering, despite it being primarily created for and consumed by men. Story 34. Traditional wife resurgence. This generation is largely growing up without women who were forced to live that way, and there are not enough living older women to explain why the status quo changed. Story 35. I think a lot of young women are pretty great, really. I think the only concern I have is the reliance on texting and social media instead of in-person communication or even phone calls. Story 36. There is a very beautiful young woman in my neighborhood. However, she has had lip filler, plastic surgery on her cheeks, wears large false eyelashes, and applies a lot of makeup. She looks at least 10 to 15 years older. Story 37. Not sure if it is real or just social media portrayal, but it seems many young girls are getting into plastic surgery and pornography more these days. People have always been interested in plastic surgery and pornography, but it seems easier than ever to get involved, and both can be very slippery slopes. Story 38. A lot of younger women, at least those on Reddit who ask for advice, have a complete lack of respect for themselves. My boyfriend cheated on me, hit me, and told me I was stupid. I love him and don't want to upset him by talking about it. How do I get over this? Have some respect for yourself and get out of the situation. In the 1990s and early 2000s, we generally seemed to have our best interests in mind, were outspoken about the way we should be treated, and did not put up with the mistreatment our parents or grandparents endured. It seems to be fading, though, and a lot of younger women are staying with these harmful people to their own detriment. I do not know why it has regressed. For context, I am 44 years old. Story 39. I am not old. I am in my very late 20s. I work with teenagers and younger individuals, and many of the girls I work with strongly believe two things. One, they will achieve financial success online, usually through influencing, but sometimes through other kinds of content creation. Two, birth control is bad and will destroy their life. Either one of these things might be true for a particular individual, but they are not universally true, and believing them can sometimes put them in a difficult situation. Story 40. They think they are progressive-minded, but any advice from older women is heard through a filter of believing older women are jealous of them, so they dismiss it. It is just good old-fashioned internalized misogyny. Story 41. An alarming lack of resilience. This is not women-specific, but more common among young people. Sometimes, actually often, life is hard, and things can be emotional or difficult to hear. You cannot fall apart at every small challenge. Pick yourself up and keep going. Examples I have seen. A young coworker, age 20, broke up with her boyfriend. She needed to take 2 weeks off work, then spent the next month barely present, mostly sitting and moping instead of doing her job. Another coworker, age 19, made a mistake at work, and our supervisor kindly asked her not to repeat it. The coworker called her mother for emotional support, had a big meeting, and ended up quitting. A friend, age 25, whose university degree was delayed by 2 years because when things became difficult, she simply would not continue. Story 42. Young women who say they will not give a date a second try if they feel no spark of sexual attraction. There is much more to a good relationship than just physical chemistry, especially on the very first date. Source: 18 years with my husband this year. Story 43. They don't get up and dance anymore. They don't have fun. Everything is for Instagram. My old, overweight, drunken self was giving it socks on the dance floor a couple of weeks ago in a nightclub. We were easily the oldest group, all in our 40s. Within 10 minutes of getting the DJ to play a few songs, I was absolutely surrounded by young men in their 20s to early 30s on the dance floor who clearly wanted to dance, but the really hot, stunningly beautiful girls were too busy looking cool and taking selfies and wouldn't get moving. I swear, I had such a good time. I was getting lots of high fives from many people who were super pumped to be getting into a high-energy dance. But the girls stood like nightclub pillars, silent, stiff, and too pretty to sweat or mess their hair. There were guys who were clearly into them, but they just didn't engage with anyone except their Instagram feed. I don't get it. When I was their age, I was rocking the dance floor in 6-inch heels, flirting, kissing, and pulling men left, right, and center. You would be kissing one man, then lose him, go for a cigarette, and flirt with many more outside. Going out was fun. Men were shooting their shot. Girls were too. I genuinely felt sorry for the young men who actually wanted to have fun but felt they couldn't. Granted, I was quite drunk, but honestly, the girls were boring. Story 44. The thing I regret most about my teenage years and early 30s is how I believed that most of my worth came from my appearance. Caused so much anxiety, took up a lot of time and energy, and was far from the truth. Most of that time was before social media, so I cannot imagine how much worse it is now. I am concerned that even more young women may believe the myth that appearance equals inherent value. Story 45. I feel like Botox is considered safe and everyone is very casual about it. I was definitely sold on the idea that it would prevent wrinkles. I have probably had it 5 times or so over a few years in my early 20s. Although I liked that it smoothed my forehead wrinkles, I feel it had a very negative effect that I don't see many people talk about. It seemed as though the muscles in my forehead atrophied and the skin above my eyes began to droop. It has taken years of facial massage to make that less noticeable. Not to mention that you are literally injecting one of the deadliest toxins into your body. I am not a medical professional, but am skeptical that this would have no long-term negative effects if used continuously for years, which you basically have to do to maintain the appearance. I just wish I had been more knowledgeable before getting it and also don't think people should take it as lightly as they do. I do not mean this to shame anyone for getting it. It is so normalized. Story 46. I am really concerned about the romanticism of economic dependence on one's spouse. I could be more supportive if the traditional wife secured beneficial prenuptial or postnuptial agreements. The original traditional wives did not fare well in sustaining their pre-divorce lifestyle and, in the absence of death benefits, often end up older, competing to enter a job market with or without marketable skills, and living in a form of suffering. Ladies, secure your finances. Money is ultimately our power. Story 47. Part of me is happy and impressed that women in their 20s are understanding how to set boundaries and know their self-worth, but from what I can see, a lot of it is over the top. Setting strict boundaries over minor issues, ending friendships without explanation because they believe they don't owe anyone anything. I'm sorry, but don't use the excuse of setting boundaries to justify bad behavior. Your self-worth doesn't mean much if you are also acting poorly. Story 48. Putting so much value into their appearance. Choosing partners who only value them for their looks. When that beauty changes or fades, they are left with a person who is not in love with them or even liked them. Story 49. It's hard for me to articulate this because I am impressed with many younger women's sense of autonomy and ability to set boundaries, especially regarding men. At the same time, I see some intense hostility towards men and attitudes that discourage normal interactions. Your sense of safety is the most important thing. Also, not every man who tries to talk to you is a creep. Be careful and be kind. Life is tough enough. Story 50. Probably the biggest issue is a fear of being awkward. They don't allow themselves to make mistakes or try new things for fear of being mocked, especially online. Echoing several points here, porn culture has made them think they need to do or perform things they're not comfortable with, such as polyamory and hardcore sex. Misunderstanding of feminism. You have the choice to do whatever you want, just don't disrespect someone else. A deep fear of aging and the belief that you become useless after 25. Continued hatred of other women, which is an age-old issue. There is also toxic positivity, where you're not allowed to dislike anyone, and if you do, there is pressure to turn it into a joke or content, which seems unhealthy. A desire to belong that, to paraphrase Andrea Dworkin, becomes a compromise with patriarchy. Women are given a solid identity and unshakable place in society as wives and mothers in exchange for demonizing all other choices and definitions of womanhood. This is where a lot of trans-exclusionary radical feminists originate, I think. Story 51. Very young girls, not women, wearing revealing skinny shorts or underwear as pants. I wish preteens and teenagers did not feel the need or pressure to dress like that at a young age. Story 52. Age gap relationships involve older men pursuing young women and conditioning them to be subservient spouses with little life experience. These women are often trapped because they have never held a job or earned a degree. The men convince them that older women are simply jealous and that their friends and family do not understand their love. It is important to protect these young women. Often, the older man eventually replaces her with a younger partner after they have children together. He may tell the new partner that the older woman lost interest in him due to becoming exhausted from childcare and household chores, and that she only cares about his money because he controlled her before she could become financially independent. Story 53. Falling for the traditional wife scam. Women with large social media followings promoting the traditional wife agenda are making a lot of money from their videos. They have a job even if it isn't a traditional office, retail, or hospitality position. Promoting the idea that women don't need the ability to hold a job puts women in a position where they can become trapped in abusive relationships because they lack the means to support themselves or any children. Everyone should have the ability to support themselves if at all possible. Even if you are in the perfect relationship with someone who loves and respects you, what if something happens and they can no longer contribute? If they get sick, injured, or die? Do not buy into the myth that women did not work or contribute to household income in the past. Women have always worked. Their contribution was often unrecognized. Historically, they worked in the family business just as men did. They also worked as maids, cooks, housekeepers, nannies, seamstresses, laundresses, nurses, governesses, teachers, shop assistants, and more, often paid in cash that went into the family funds. A farmer's wife worked as much as the farmer, performing different tasks. The term spinster, for an unmarried woman, comes from the job title of someone who spun thread. Because they were well paid, they could be independent. Story 54. The obsession with influencers and social media, constant selfies, and concerns about image and products are draining their joy. Story 55. The social regression. We fought for the right to have access to equal opportunity and be rewarded for our skills, ability, and talent. To be recognized and rewarded for our competence. Now, I fully understand the identity issues teenagers and young women go through, but the prevalence, especially on social media, of young women thinking and acting as if only their sexuality mattered is incredibly disheartening. Story 56. The main point is that almost all the female recording artists except for Billie Eilish dressed provocatively and squatted in front of their audiences with their legs open, or simulated sexual acts, similar to what you would see in a strip club. I miss artists like Linda Ronstadt, Joan Baez, or even artists from the 1990s like Alanis Morissette. Many young female artists are nude on album covers and sexualized. Why can't female artists simply make great music? Why are there overt sexual overtones all the time? That's my rant. I am not a prude. Story 57. I do not know if I count as older. I am 28, but I love that my generation is not willing to take abuse from employers. I love that so much. I am worried about the injections and Botox and similar treatments. Aging is inevitable, we should go with grace. These injections make people look like lizards to me. Story 58. Getting Botox, filler, buccal fat removal, or facelifts at 18. There is no need for a facelift for an 18-year-old woman. Story 59. I am not against plastic surgery, but these girls are not even finished developing and are completely altering their bodies. Your body changes and settles into your early to mid-20s, and you should wait for it to work itself into place before you do any major procedures. I have body image issues just like most women do. I would love to have breast implants, but I never considered Botox, fillers, or buccal fat removal as a teenager or young adult. Story 60. Eighth grade girls talking seriously about calories when there is something to celebrate at school. We did the same when I was that age, but we did not have access to fitness or calorie tracking applications to the extent they have now. Story 61. I am a bit concerned about the traditional wife movement. There is nothing wrong with being a stay-at-home mother, but it needs to be done wisely, with protections in place so if or when things do not work out with your husband, you are not left without skills, work history, or a retirement account. The traditional wife movement, especially when mixed with religion, does not seem concerned with any of that. It is as if they have lost all appreciation for the battles their grandmothers and great-grandmothers fought for them. As a society, we are forgetting just how powerless women used to be. Story 62. Girl math, financial illiteracy, and ignorance are harmful, perpetuate negative stereotypes about women, and are not acceptable. Story 63. How to be a high-value woman and level up with rich hobbies and get a provider husband so you do not have to work advice. It is completely inapplicable to the vast majority of young women consuming the content and dangerous to those who try to apply it without a strong support network. Here is a big secret, young ladies. Men will find you attractive well into your 40s, 50s, and beyond if you cultivate your mind and social networks. Play the long game and you will be good. Story 64. I am 37. I am concerned anytime a woman under 25 considers being with a man my age or older. Girl, we did not want him, and neither should you. Story 65. Since moving to Utah, I have noticed a significant lack of basic sexual education. Many women here believe they should be married by age 20, have no understanding of how sex or pregnancy work, and thought they were dying when they had their first menstrual cycle or believed they were pregnant after sitting fully clothed next to a boy. This is quite alarming. Story 66. I live in a college town, and it always bothers me how much young women conform to their group. There was conformity when I grew up, but now it is off the charts. When my husband and I go out, we sometimes see groups of young women who are all blonde or brunette, wearing high-collar black or white crop tops, sometimes the exact same top, with jeans and white tennis shoes. Their hair is either down or worn up in a hair claw, always parted down the middle. I am talking about a group of 10 to 20 women who look like clones of each other. What happens if one woman dares to wear something different so that she stands out, or so that she expresses her own taste? Story 67. The pick-me attitude and taking for granted all the rights recently granted to us, such as voting, having a credit card, and reproductive choice. Story 68. Aging is not seen as a privilege. There is a lot of fixing going on when there was nothing to fix to start with. Story 69. The ease with which girls physically fight, jump, and attack one another just blows my mind. I am unsure where that mentality came from. Also, wearing pajama pants, bonnets, bathrobes, and booty shorts out in public, such as while traveling, is surprising. Story 70. They are falling into the traditional Christian wife role we watched our mothers lose their identities in. Edit. Think Kathy Bates's character in Fried Green Tomatoes. I do not want them to be screaming into the void after 50 because they have devoted all their lives to giving and never found what they love or who they are. Story 71. Too much makeup. Way too much. And frankly, too much ill-informed skincare. You do not need all those steps. Now, cleanse. Use active ingredients. Moisturize. Apply sunscreen if it is daytime. Period. Toner is optional. The best makeup is good skin. Story 72. I thought the strive for perfection and body shaming was bad from 2003 onwards, but these beautiful young ladies cannot make a mistake for even 1 second. It feels like, and I might be wrong, there is no room for mistakes, individuality, or imperfection. Also, men are even more disappointing now than they were before, which makes me feel sad for them. Story 73. Not wanting to have a career and have more children than they can really afford emotionally and financially. Story 74. So obsessed with things. They all want more items. Makeup, clothes, perfume, phones, and more. Story 75. I feel they have little appreciation for the women who came before them. How many of the things they take for granted, such as job opportunities, good wages, childcare options, and respect in the workplace, exist because of the generations of women who fought the good fight? I am not sure if they realize it, but maybe it is a good sign that those things are expected and not the exception. Story 76. Having to constantly look perfect, as if they have their life together and seem to be doing wonderful, is not realistic and is exhausting. Do you really want to be friends or in love with someone who loves this alternate reality of you and not the real you? Be yourself. Do not use fillers. Do not post about a life that does not truly exist. Do not love things about other people that you cannot stand. Story 77. Dismissing any woman over 30 who speaks up about anything as a Karen shows a lack of understanding of the misogyny and ageism associated with that label. Most of the young women I work with have little understanding or interest in feminism or knowledge of the work already done to secure rights and equality. Rights are not permanent. We need to constantly maintain them. They do not seem to recognize that. Additionally, seeing the pornification of society and relationships as female empowerment is concerning. There have always been selfish, dishonest men, but in the past, it was not assumed acceptable to choke a woman the first time you are intimate without consent or a safe word. Story 78. I am in my 20s, but I see many teenage girls in public who wear a lot of makeup or dress as if they work in an office. I remember when I was a teenager, the only clothes that made me look older were my Galaxy bag. Story 79. So many young women walk around with earbuds or noise-canceling headphones on all the time. Women, you need to be aware of your surroundings, and that includes being able to hear what is happening around you. This is not victim blaming, but you become an easier target for crime when you appear distracted. Story 80. How sexualized girls are. They are barely teenagers and dressed like adults going to a club. I toe this weird borderline. Women should be able to wear what they want, but also knowing that sexualizing yourself is exactly what the patriarchy wants, and it is all cloaked in how empowering it is. Sex workers are complaining that they are having a hard time because regular women and girls are wearing the same clothing. As empowered as people want to be, I cannot see any way in which that is good. Story 81. All the plastic surgery procedures, even in their late teens, are concerning. I hate to see this and am really fearful for the future. We have regressed, and that truly makes me sad. Story 82. Their utter lack of awareness about women's rights is distressing. Have none of their mothers taught them about glass ceilings, quid pro quo, or the capacity to have a bank account without someone else's permission? Their blatant ignorance about why it is not acceptable to become property upon marriage is extremely troubling. Story 83. 53-year-old female. My main concern is the amount of pressure young women are experiencing because of social media. OnlyFans is presented as if it is nothing and easy money by a couple of celebrities. You are producing adult content. Maybe one day a future employer or your children will see you performing sexual acts. This is something to seriously consider before proceeding. I am not prudish and society has changed, but for some jobs, for example teaching, it may be an obstacle. I am also concerned about all the body modifications. I really hope you will not regret them later. It is sad to see perfectly normal and beautiful women thinking they need plastic surgery. Story 84. The same thing I noticed about younger women when I was younger. The men they chose to have their children with. You picked a man whose entire family has been to prison. No one has ever had a job. He has cheated on you with all your friends, and yet you were going to marry him and have children with him? Story 85. Excessive use of plastic surgery and fillers, and allowing your daughters to enter the sex industry via OnlyFans. The demoralization of youth caused by improper parenting creates lasting effects throughout their lifetime. Story 86. Teenaged girls actively participate in hookup culture. It is not giving them what they think it is. They end up confused, sad, and lonely. I believe it is the opposite of what they are looking for. Story 87. They are ignorant about birth control. I do not know when that happened, but it did. Literally, women with graduate degrees saying things like, birth control has only really been a thing for the last 20 years. I also heard that many younger women are choosing to use condoms alone because they do not want to put hormones in their bodies. Sure, but having a baby if the condom breaks is not an ideal option. Story 88. I honestly don't see anything that wasn't also a problem when we were young, only with slightly different aspects. There have always been women who buy into the idea that a woman's place is in the home. It's everywhere online, but when I see the statistics for women graduating secondary education, they just keep increasing. I think most of them will be fine. We always have and probably always will have body image issues. The ideal image changes with the times, but I don't think this is an issue we will ever completely eradicate. People express concern over plastic surgery and similar procedures, but attitudes are shifting. Smaller procedures will likely remain popular, but extreme alterations that make you look artificial are and will continue falling out of favor. I am concerned about young people disconnecting from real life in favor of being on their phones or other devices. However, that is a concern for everyone, not just young women. I am more concerned about the society being legislated around them, and that is as much or more the fault of older generations than theirs. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.